The rope burned into Eva's wrists as the wagon lurched forward, every jolt, a reminder that she and Mira were nothing more than cargo now. 3 men, 1 wagon, and by nightfall they'd said both women would be sold to the highest bidder. When rough hands reached for Mira in the darkness, Eva's voice cracked through her gag. "Wait, we're taking it off." It was a lie that bought them seconds, but seconds were all they needed to begin fighting back. Stay with us until the end of this story and drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these tales travel across the world. The Texas sun didn't just beat down, it punished. It pressed against the canvas cover of the wagon like a hand trying to smother whatever life remained beneath it. Eva Mallory felt every degree of that heat seeping through her torn dress, through her skin, down into her bones. Her wrists were bound so tight behind her back that her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. Maybe 2. Time had lost all meaning somewhere between the creek where they'd been ambushed and this endless, rattling hell. Beside her, Mira Holt sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her dark eyes fixed on nothing. The gag across her mouth was stained with blood from where she'd bitten through her own lip trying not to scream. Eva wanted to reach for her to offer some kind of comfort, but her hands were useless, and her voice was trapped behind cotton fabric that tasted of dust and sweat and fear. The wagon hit another rut, and both women jolted upward, their bodies slamming back down onto the splintered wood. Eva's shoulder screamed in protest. She'd dislocated it once before years ago, falling from a horse her father said was too wild for a girl to ride. This felt worse. Everything felt worse. "How much longer you figure?" one of the men called from the driver's bench. His voice was rough casual, like he was asking about the weather and not about how many miles remained until he could sell 2 human beings. "Sundown," another answered. "Told McCready we'd have him to the trading post by sundown. He's got buyers lined up already." Both of them. Both of them. The dark-haired one's young healthy. She'll fetch a good price. The other one, a pause. Eva could feel eyes on her even through the canvas. "She's got fight in her. Some men pay extra for that." Laughter rolled through the dry air like thunder before a storm that would never come. Eva's stomach turned. She pressed her spine against the wagon's side and tried to breathe through her nose, tried to keep the panic from rising up her throat like bile. She'd heard stories every woman on the frontier had about what happened to girls who disappeared, about the trading posts where flesh was sold like cattle, about the mines and the brothels and the homesteads where women worked until their bodies gave out and then were left in shallow graves no one would ever mark. She'd never believed she'd become one of those stories. But here she was. The wagon slowed, then stopped. Eva's heart hammered against her ribs. Footsteps crunched in the dirt outside. The canvas tore back, flooding the space with blinding white light. Eva squinted, trying to make out the figure silhouetted against the sun. "Well now," the man said, climbing into the wagon with heavy, deliberate movements. He was broad-shouldered, with a thick beard streaked with gray and eyes that gleamed with something Eva recognized immediately: cruelty. "Let's have a look at what we got." He crouched down in front of Mira, first reaching out to grab her chin. Mira jerked back and he laughed a wet, ugly sound. "She's a fighter too," he said over his shoulder. "Maybe we undersold 'em, boys. Maybe we should keep 'em another day. See what else they got in 'em." "Boss said sundown Cole," one of the other men called. "You know how he gets when we're late." "Boss ain't here, is he?" Cole's fingers moved to the gag around Mira's mouth. "Maybe I just want to hear what she sounds like when she begs." That was when Eva moved. She didn't think. Thinking would have paralyzed her. Instead, she lunged forward as much as her bound body would allow and slammed her shoulder into Cole's side. It wasn't much. She was small, weakened, and tied, but it was enough to knock him off balance. He cursed, stumbling backward, and his boot caught the edge of the wagon bed. For one perfect crystalline moment, Eva thought he might fall. He didn't. Instead, his hand shot out and caught the wagon's frame, steadying himself. When he turned back to her, his face had gone dark with rage. "You little—" "Wait!" Eva's voice was muffled behind the gag, but she forced the word out, forced it to sound like she had something to say, something worth hearing. "Oomph. Tum King, oomph." Cole paused. His eyes narrowed. "What?" Eva jerked her head toward her mouth, then toward Mira. She tried to make her eyes wide, pleading, like she was about to offer something valuable. A secret. Information. Anything to make him stop to buy them even a few more minutes. Wait, we're taking it off, she mumbled through the fabric. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled slow and mean. You got something to say, girl? Eva nodded frantically. He reached forward and yanked the gag down from her mouth. The fabric scraped against her split lips and she tasted copper. She sucked in a desperate breath, her lungs screaming for air. Well, Cole leaned in close. His breath reeked of whiskey and tobacco. I'm listening. Eva's mind raced. She had no plan, no secret, nothing but a shard of wire she'd found on the floor of the wagon earlier when they'd first thrown her inside. It was small, bent, probably useless, but she'd managed to wedge it into the torn seam of her sleeve when Cole wasn't looking. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Eva's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, tasting blood. I know where there's gold. Cole's eyebrows lifted. Behind him, she heard one of the other men laugh. Gold, Cole repeated. Girl, you think we're stupid. I'm not lying. Eva forced herself to meet his eyes. My father, before he died, he had a claim, up near the Brazos. No one knows about it, not even his partners. He told me before he... She let her voice trail off, let her eyes shimmer with tears that weren't entirely fake. He made me promise not to tell. It was a gamble, a desperate, pathetic gamble, and she could see in Cole's face that he didn't believe a word of it, but he also did not believe it. Greed was a funny thing. It could make men stupid. Where? Cole demanded. I'll show you, Eva said quickly. But not if I'm dead. Not if I'm sold. You let us go, both of us, and I'll take you there. Cole stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed a sound like breaking glass. You got guts, I'll give you that. He reached out and grabbed her face, his fingers digging into her jaw. But I ain't that dumb, sweetheart. Nice try, though. He shoved her backward, and Eva's head cracked against the wooden slat behind her. Stars exploded across her vision. She heard Mira make a muffled sound of protest, but it was distant, like she was underwater. Put the gag back on, Cole ordered one of the other men. And keep an eye on this one. She's got more brains than sense. The canvas fell closed again, trapping them in darkness. Eva's head throbbed. Her wrists burned. But beneath the pain, beneath the terror, something else flickered to life. Anger. She wasn't going to die like this. Not in the back of a wagon. Not as cargo. She was going to fight. And if she died fighting, at least it would be on her own terms. Her fingers found the wire in her sleeve again. It was small, sharp, perfect. She just had to wait for the right moment. What? Chapter 2. Nightfall. The wagon rolled on as the sun bled across the horizon, painting the Texas sky in shades of rust and gold. Eva counted the hours by the slant of light through the gaps in the canvas. Sunset came slowly out here like the world was reluctant to let go of the day. She didn't blame it. Darkness meant the end of the journey. Darkness meant the trading post, the buyers, the point of no return. Unless she did something first. Beside her, Mira had gone still. Too still. Eva nudged her with her shoulder, and Mira's eyes flicked toward her dull, exhausted, but still alive. That was enough. As long as they were both alive, there was still a chance. The wagon finally lurched to a stop as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon. Eva's pulse quickened. She heard the men climbing down, heard their boots hitting the dirt, heard the low murmur of voices planning what came next. We'll camp here tonight, Cole said. Trading post opens at dawn. We'll get there early, get this done, and be back on the trail by noon. What about them? Another voice asked. They ain't going nowhere. Just keep 'em tied. I'll take first watch. Footsteps moved away. A fire crackled to life somewhere nearby, and the smell of coffee and salted meat drifted through the canvas. Eva's stomach clenched, not from hunger, but from the bitter irony of how normal it all seemed. 3 men sitting around a campfire, drinking and eating and laughing, while 2 women lay bound and bleeding just a few feet away. She waited. Patience was its own kind of torture, but she forced herself to stay still to let the minutes crawl past. She listened as the men's voices grew louder, more reckless. They were drinking. That was good. Drunk men got careless. The fire popped and hissed. One of the men started singing some bawdy tune Eva vaguely recognized from a saloon her father had dragged her past once. The others joined in, their voices rough and off-key. Eva's fingers worked the wire free from her sleeve. It was barely 3 inches long, bent in the middle with a sharp point on one end. She twisted her wrists trying to angle the wire toward the rope. It was awkward. Painful, every movement sent fresh jolts of agony up her arms, but she didn't stop. The wire caught on something, fiber maybe, or just resistance. Eva gritted her teeth and sawed back and forth, back and forth. The rope was thick, coarse, made to hold livestock, but wire could cut through anything if you gave it enough time. She just hoped she had enough time. The singing stopped. Eva froze, her breath caught in her throat. Had they heard? Had someone noticed? "Deal me in," one of the men said. "Cards." They were playing cards. Eva started sawing again. Her hands were slick with blood now, some from the rope burns, some from where the wire had sliced into her own palm. She didn't care. Pain was temporary. Freedom wasn't. A strand of rope snapped. Eva bit down on her gag to keep from gasping. One strand down. How many more 10-20? She didn't know. She just kept going, kept sawing, kept praying that the men stayed distracted. Another strand broke, then another. The rope around her wrist started to loosen. Not much, just enough for her to twist her hands to angle the wire better. She worked faster now, adrenaline surging through her veins. The fire crackled. The men argued over a hand of cards, and Eva sawed through rope like her life depended on it. Because it did. Finally, the last strand gave way. Her hands were free. Eva didn't move. Not yet. She stayed perfectly still, listening. The men were still at the fire, still drinking. Cole's voice rose above the others, loud and boastful. He was telling a story about some woman he'd known in Abilene. The others laughed. Eva reached up slowly and pulled the gag from her mouth. Her jaw ached from being clenched for so long. She worked it carefully, stretching the stiff muscles, then turned her attention to Mira. Mira's eyes widened when she saw Eva's hands were free. Eva pressed a finger to her lips, quiet, and then started working on Mira's ropes. These were tighter, newer. The wire slipped twice before Eva found purchase. She sawed as quietly as she could, every scrape of metal against fiber sounding impossibly loud in her own ears. But the men didn't notice. Mira's ropes fell away. Eva pulled the gag from her friend's mouth, and Mira sucked in a shuddering breath. Her lips formed a single word. How Eva didn't answer. There wasn't time. She pointed toward the back of the wagon where the canvas hung loose. Then she held up 3 fingers, 3 men, and pointed toward the fire. Mira nodded. She understood. They had to run. Eva moved first, crawling toward the canvas on her hands and knees. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her legs were stiff from being bound for hours, her hands shaking from blood loss and exhaustion. But she didn't stop. She reached the edge of the wagon, lifted the canvas just enough to peer out. The camp was small. The fire burned low in the center, casting flickering shadows across the 3 men huddled around it. Cole sat with his back to the wagon, a bottle in one hand, cards in the other. The other 2 faced him, their attention locked on the game. Beyond the fire, darkness stretched in every direction. No moon, no stars, just the endless swallowing black of the Texas plains. It was perfect. Eva looked back at Mira and nodded. Then she slipped over the edge of the wagon and dropped to the ground. The impact sent a shockwave of pain through her legs, but she didn't cry out. She crouched low, hidden in the shadow of the wagon, and waited for Mira. A moment later, Mira landed beside her, silent, graceful, like a cat. They didn't run. Not yet. Running made noise, and noise meant death. Instead, they crawled away from the fire, away from the voices, toward the void of darkness that promised either freedom or oblivion. Eva's hands found thorns. She felt them pierce her palms, felt warm blood well up, but she didn't stop. Beside her, Mira moved just as desperately, just as silently. 20 feet, 30, 50. And then Cole's voice cut through the night like a knife. "Where the hell? Get them!" Eva didn't look back. She grabbed Mira's hand and ran. The darkness swallowed them whole. Branches whipped across Eva's face, tearing at her skin. Rocks bit into her bare feet. Her shoes had been lost hours ago, somewhere between the creek and the wagon. She didn't care. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs buckled, until the shouts behind them faded into the distance. Only then did she stop. She and Mira collapsed together in the dirt, gasping for air, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror and something that felt dangerously close to hope. We did it, Mira whispered. Her voice was hoarse, broken. We actually did it. Eva wanted to believe her, but she knew better than to celebrate yet. Out here in the wild dark of the frontier, freedom was just another word for not dead yet, and the night was far from over. Chapter 3. The Plains at Dawn. They walked through the darkness until their legs gave out. There was no plan, no direction, just the desperate animal instinct to put distance between themselves and the men who would kill them if given the chance. Eva's feet were torn to ribbons by the time the first gray light of dawn started creeping across the horizon. Every step left a small smear of blood on the dusty ground, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant realizing just how utterly, hopelessly lost they were. Beside her, Mira stumbled. Eva caught her before she felt her own body swaying with the effort. They were both running on fumes now. No water, no food, no rest. Just fear and adrenaline and the stubborn refusal to lie down and die. "We need to stop," Mira rasped. "Just for a minute." "Not yet," Eva said, though her own voice was barely more than a whisper. "Not until we find cover." But there was no cover. Not out here. The plains stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by scattered mesquite and the occasional outcropping of rock. They were exposed vulnerable, and sunrise would make them even more so. "Eva," Mira said again, and this time she didn't ask. She just sank to her knees. Eva looked down at her friend and felt something crack inside her chest. Mira's face was gray with exhaustion, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her dress, once a soft blue cotton, was now torn and filthy, hanging off her thin frame like a funeral shroud. She looked like a ghost. Maybe they both did. Eva knelt beside her. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, we'll rest, just for a few minutes." Mira nodded and closed her eyes, leaning against Eva's shoulder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. There was only the sound of their ragged breathing and the whisper of wind through dry grass. The sky continued to lighten. Eva watched the horizon turn from black to gray to pale gold. It should have been beautiful. Out here, away from towns and people, the sunrise was supposed to be something sacred. That's what her father used to say. He'd take her out onto the porch of their old cabin, and they'd watch the sun come up together, and he'd tell her that every sunrise was a gift. But this sunrise felt like a countdown, because somewhere behind them, Cole and his men were tracking. And out here with no water and no shelter, it was only a matter of time before they were found. "Do you think they're following us?" Mira asked quietly. Eva didn't answer right away. She wanted to lie, to offer some kind of comfort, but Mira deserved the truth. "Yes." "How long do we have?" "I don't know." Eva scanned the horizon, searching for something, anything that might save them. But there was nothing, just more emptiness. "Maybe a few hours, maybe less. Then we should keep moving." "Mira." "No." Mira opened her eyes and looked at Eva with sudden, fierce determination. "If we're going to die out here, I'd rather die on my feet." Eva felt a swell of emotion she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or grief? Or both. She reached out and squeezed Mira's hand. "Then we walk." They stood together, their bodies protesting every movement, and started forward again. The sun climbed higher. The heat came with it, brutal and unforgiving. Eva's throat felt like sandpaper. Her tongue was swollen, her lips so dry they'd started to split. Beside her, Mira swayed with every step, her eyes half closed. They needed water, soon, or the desert would finish what the slavers had started. It was Mira who saw him first. "Eva," she whispered, her hand shooting out to grip Eva's arm. "Look." Eva followed her gaze and felt her heart seize. There, about 100 yards ahead, was a man. He stood perfectly still, silhouetted against the pale sky. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. In one hand he held a bucket. In the other, a coiled rope hung from his belt. For a moment, Eva couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything but stand there like prey caught in the open. But where would they run? They were already dead on their feet. The man started walking toward them. Mira's grip on Eva's arm tightened. "What do we do?" Eva didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he with Cole? Had they been found? Or was this someone new, another predator drawn by the scent of easy prey? The man stopped about 20 feet away. Up close, Eva could see his face now, weathered, lined with eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked them over slowly, taking in their torn dresses, their bloodied feet, the terror written plain across their faces. Then he did something Eva didn't expect. He set the bucket down in the dirt and took a step back. "Waters," he said. His voice was low, rough, like he didn't use it often. "You look like you need it." Eva stared at the bucket, then at the man, then back at the bucket. It had to be a trick. It had to be. But her body didn't care about tricks. Her body only knew thirst. She took a step forward, then another. Mira followed, moving like a sleepwalker. They reached the bucket together and dropped to their knees. Eva's hand shook as she lifted it to her lips. The water was warm, metallic tasting, the most beautiful thing she'd ever encountered in her life. She drank until her stomach cramped, then passed the bucket to Mira. The man watched them in silence. When they'd both drunk their fill, Eva forced herself to look up at him. "Who are you, Thomas Granger," he said. "This is my land." "Are you—" Eva's voice cracked. "Are you going to hurt us?" Thomas's expression didn't change. "No." "Why not?" He was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Because I'm not them." Them. The word hung in the air like smoke. "You're running from someone," Thomas continued. It wasn't a question. Eva nodded slowly. "3 men. They're hunting us." "How far back?" "I don't know. A few hours, maybe?" Thomas looked toward the horizon, his jaw tight. Then he looked back at them. "Can you ride?" Yes," Eva said. "Good." He turned and whistled, sharp and piercing. A moment later, a horse appeared over a low rise, trotting toward them. It was a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a scarred shoulder. "His name's Red. He'll carry you both." "Where are we going?" Mira asked. "My ranch," Thomas said. "It's about 3 miles north. You'll be safe there." Eva wanted to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that safety was a lie people told themselves. "How do we know you're not just taking us somewhere worse?" Thomas met her eyes. There was something in his gaze, something old and tired and sad. "You don't," he said simply. "But you don't have a lot of options right now." He was right. They didn't. Eva looked at Mira and Mira nodded. They were out of time, out of strength, out of choices. "Okay," Eva said. "We'll go with you." Thomas helped them onto the horse first, Mira, then Eva behind her. Eva wrapped her arms around Mira's waist, feeling her friend's ribs sharp beneath her hands. They were both so thin now, hollow, like the desert had already started claiming them. Thomas took the reins and started walking, leading the horse north. He didn't speak, didn't look back, just moved with the quiet, steady purpose of a man who knew exactly where he was going. Eva closed her eyes and let herself sway with the horse's rhythm. For the first time in what felt like years, she wasn't running, wasn't fighting. She was just moving forward. It didn't feel like hope, but it was close enough. Chapter 4. The Ranch. The ranch appeared like a mirage first as a dark shape on the horizon, then gradually taking form as they drew closer. It wasn't much to look at: a single-story wooden house with a sagging porch, a barn that had seen better decades, a split-rail corral where a few horses stood with their heads down against the heat. But to Eva, it looked like salvation. Thomas led them into the yard and helped them down from the horse. Eva's legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground. She caught herself against Red's shoulder, feeling the animal's warmth, his solid living presence. It was the most stable thing she'd touched in days. "Inside," Thomas said, nodding toward the house. "There's a room in the back you can use. Clean clothes in the chest, water pumps by the kitchen." Eva and Mira exchanged glances, then slowly made their way up the porch steps. The wood creaked under their weight, a lonely sound in the vast quiet. Eva pushed open the door and they stepped into shadow and silence. The house smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else Eva couldn't quite place. Loneliness, maybe. It was tidy but sparse. A table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, a single shelf lined with books whose spines were cracked from use. Everything in the room spoke of a man who lived alone and intended to keep it that way. This way. Thomas brushed past them and led them down a short hallway to a small room at the back of the house. It held a narrow bed, a wooden chest, and a window that looked out over the endless plains. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the glass. Thomas opened the chest and pulled out 2 simple dresses, faded cotton but clean and whole. "They were my wife's," he said quietly. "She's been gone 5 years now. Figured they might as well see some use." Mira took the dresses carefully, like they might dissolve in her hands. "Thank you." Thomas nodded once, then turned to leave. At the doorway he paused. "There's a tub out back if you want to wash. I'll heat water, and I'll make something to eat. You both look half dead." Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway. Eva sank onto the edge of the bed and buried her face in her hands. Her whole body was shaking now, not from fear, but from the sudden overwhelming rush of relief and exhaustion. They were inside. They were safe, at least for now. "Eva," Mira's voice was soft. "You okay?" Eva laughed a broken, desperate sound. "I don't know. Are you?" "I don't know either." Mira sat down beside her and took her hand. "But we're here. We're alive. That's something." "For how long?" Mira didn't answer. There was no answer to give. An hour later, they sat at Thomas's table, clean and dressed in dead woman's clothes, eating stew that tasted like mercy. Thomas had barely said a word since bringing them inside. He just set bowls in front of them and returned to whatever work occupied his days. Eva could hear him outside now, hammering at something in the barn. "He's strange," Mira whispered. "He saved us," Eva countered. "Why, though? What does he want?" It was a fair question. Men didn't just help women out of the goodness of their hearts, not out here where kindness was as rare as rain. There had to be a reason, a price. But Eva was too tired to figure it out right now. She finished her stew and set down her spoon, her stomach finally full for the first time in days. It felt foreign, wrong almost, like her body didn't remember how to exist without hunger. Mira pushed her bowl away, her expression troubled. "We should leave," she said quietly. "Tonight, before those men find us." "Leave and go where?" "I don't know, anywhere, the next town. Maybe find work." "Mira." Eva reached across the table and gripped her friend's hand. "We don't even know where the next town is. We're in the middle of nowhere with no money, no supplies, nothing. If we leave now, we'll be dead by morning. And if we stay, what then?" "I don't know," Eva admitted. "But at least here we have a chance." Before Mira could respond, the front door opened. Thomas stepped inside, his shirt damp with sweat, his hands stained with axle grease. He moved to the water pump and started washing his back to them. "Those men," he said without turning around. "The ones hunting you, what do they want?" Eva hesitated. "Then they were taking us to a trading post, to sell us." Thomas's hand stilled. "Slavers." "Yes." "How many?" "3. Maybe more by now." "And you escaped?" "Last night, while they were drinking." Thomas turned to face them, drying his hands on a rag. His expression was unreadable. "They'll come looking." "I know," Eva said. "They'll track you here." "Probably." Thomas nodded slowly like he'd expected as much. Then he tossed the rag onto the counter and said, "Then we'll be ready when they do." Eva blinked. You think I'm just going to hand you over?" Thomas's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. "I didn't pull you off the plains just to watch you get dragged back into hell." "Why not?" Mira asked suddenly. "Why do you care what happens to us?" Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Because nobody cared what happened to my wife when she needed help. And I'm not going to be that kind of man." The silence that followed was heavy aching. Finally, Eva said, "Thank you." Thomas shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. If those men come, it won't be pretty." "They'll kill you," Mira said, "for helping us." "Maybe." Thomas moved to the window and looked out at the darkening sky. "But I've been dying slow out here for 5 years anyway. Might as well make it mean something. But night fell like a curtain. Eva lay in the narrow bed, staring up at the ceiling, listening to Mira's breathing beside her. She should sleep. Her body desperately needed it. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cole's face, felt his hands, heard his laughter. She sat up carefully, trying not to wake Mira, and padded barefoot to the window. Outside, the plain stretched into darkness, vast and empty and somehow hungry. Somewhere out there, 3 men were coming. She could feel it in her bones. A light flickered in the barn. Eva frowned. It was late, well past midnight. What was Thomas doing out there? She slipped out of the room and through the quiet house, then stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of sage and dust. She crossed the yard and pushed open the barn door. Thomas stood at a workbench, loading bullets into a rifle by lamplight. He didn't look up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." Eva moved closer, watching his hands work with practiced efficiency. "You really think they'll come?" "I know they will." He clicked the last bullet into place and set the rifle aside. Men like that don't let things go, especially not things they think they own. "We're not things." "I know that. They don't." Thomas finally looked at her. In the lamplight, his eyes were dark shadowed. "You ever shot a gun?" Eva shook her head. "You're about to learn." He picked up a pistol from the bench and handed it to her. It was heavier than she expected, cold and solid in her palm. "This is a Colt. 6 shots. You pull back the hammer like this, then you aim and squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Squeeze. Pulling makes you flinch." "I don't want to kill anyone," Eva said quietly. "Neither do I." Thomas's voice was grim. "But sometimes wanting doesn't matter. Sometimes you do what you have to do to survive." Eva looked down at the gun in her hand. It felt like holding death itself. "When they come," Thomas continued, "you stay inside with Mira. Lock the door. Don't come out unless I tell you to. And if they kill you, then you run, and you don't stop running until you hit the next town." "That's not a plan." "It's the only plan we've got." Eva wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there had to be another way. But she'd learned the hard way that the frontier didn't care about other ways. It only cared about who was left standing when the dust settled. "Why are you doing this, Whoop?" she asked. "Really?" Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because 5 years ago my wife got sick, real sick, and I rode to town to get a doctor, but by the time I got back—" He stopped, swallowed. "She was alone when she died, and every day since I've wondered if things would have been different if someone had been there, if someone had cared enough to help." His voice had gone rough, thick with old grief. "I can't bring her back," he continued. "But I can make damn sure no one else dies alone on my watch." Eva's throat tightened. She wanted to say something comforting, something meaningful, but words felt inadequate. Instead, she just nodded. Thomas turned back to his rifles. "Get some sleep. Dawn's coming fast." Eva left the barn and walked back across the yard, the pistol still clutched in her hand. When she climbed back into bed beside Mira, she slid the gun under her pillow, just in case. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. And somewhere in the darkness, 3 men rode toward a reckoning they didn't see coming. Dawn broke with the color of old blood. Eva woke to the sound of horses, distant but unmistakable. Her eyes snapped open, her hand instinctively reaching for the pistol under her pillow. Beside her, Mira stirred, then froze as she heard it too. "Eva," Mira whispered. "They're here." Eva sat up slowly, her heart already hammering against her ribs. Through the window, she could see the sun just cresting the horizon, painting long shadows across the yard. And there, at the edge of Thomas's property, 3 figures on horseback emerged from the golden haze, like demons summoned from hell itself. The door to their room opened. Thomas stood there, rifle in hand, his face carved from stone. "Get dressed. Stay quiet. And whatever happens, don't come outside unless I tell you to." "Thomas?" Eva started. "I mean it." His voice was sharp, final. "This isn't a discussion." He turned and walked down the hallway, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Eva and Mira scrambled out of bed, pulling on their borrowed dresses with shaking hands. Eva grabbed the pistol and checked it like Thomas had shown her cylinder-full hammer down. Her palms were sweating. They moved to the window and watched. The 3 riders had stopped about 50 yards from the house. Even from this distance, Eva could make out Cole's broad shoulders, his thick beard catching the morning light. The other two flanked him, one thin and wiry, with a scar across his cheek, the other young and nervous-looking, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. Thomas stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held loose but ready. He didn't say anything, just stood there waiting. Cole urged his horse forward a few paces. "Mornin'!" he called out, his voice carrying across the empty space between them. "Beautiful day, ain't it?" Thomas didn't respond. "We're looking for something," Cole continued. "Two women, young, scared. They might have come through here last night." "Might have," Thomas said. His voice was calm, measured. "But they didn't." Cole smiled that same cruel smile Eva remembered from the wagon. "Now, friend, I think you're lying to me. See, we tracked them right to your doorstep. Their footprints are all over your yard." "Could be anyone's footprints." "Could be." Cole leaned forward in his saddle. "But I don't think so. I think you got my property inside that house right now, and I'm here to collect what's mine." "Nobody owns people," Thomas said quietly. "Out here?" Cole laughed. "Out here, people own whatever they can take, and I'm taking back what belongs to me." The scarred man on Cole's left spat into the dirt. "We don't want trouble, mister. Just give us the girls and we'll be on our way." "And if I don't," Cole's smile faded, "then we'll take them anyway, and we'll burn your house down while we're at it." Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then he raised his rifle, not aiming, just lifting it enough to make his intentions clear. "Get off my land!" The young man on the right shifted nervously in his saddle. "Cole, maybe we should—" "Shut up." Cole's hand moved to his own rifle, still strapped to his saddle. "You got 3 seconds to change your mind, friend. After that, we're coming in." "1," Thomas said. Cole's eyes narrowed. "2." The scarred man drew his pistol. "3." Everything happened at once. The scarred man fired first, a wild shot that splintered the porch railing beside Thomas's leg. Thomas dropped to one knee and fired back, his rifle cracking like thunder. The bullet caught the scarred man in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in his saddle. He screamed and fell, hitting the ground hard. Cole yanked his rifle free and fired. The shot punched through the porch post, inches from Thomas's head, sending splinters flying. Thomas rolled behind a water trough and fired again, but Cole was already moving his horse, wheeling away. The young man panicked. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession, all of them going wide, then turned his horse and bolted. Inside the house, Eva watched with her heart in her throat. She could see Thomas reloading, his movements quick and efficient, even as bullets tore into the porch around him. Cole had dismounted now and was using his horse as cover, firing methodically, trying to pin Thomas down. "We have to help him," Eva said. "He told us to stay inside," Mira said, but her voice was shaking. "He's going to die out there." Eva moved before she could think about it. She threw open the door and ran down the hallway, the pistol clutched in both hands. Behind her, she heard Mira cry out, but she didn't stop. She burst through the front door onto the porch just as Cole fired again. The bullet whined past her ear so close she felt the heat of it. She dropped into a crouch and raised her pistol, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. Cole turned toward her, his eyes widening in recognition. "Well, well," he said, already swinging his rifle toward her. "There you are." Eva squeezed the trigger. The gun kicked in her hands, the sound deafening. The bullet went wide, kicking up dirt 3 feet to Cole's left. She squeezed again, another miss. Cole laughed and took aim. Then Thomas rose from behind the water trough and fired. The bullet caught Cole in the leg just above the knee. He went down hard, his rifle flying from his hands. He hit the ground, clutching his leg, blood pouring between his fingers. "You son of a—" He reached for the pistol at his belt. Thomas was already moving. He crossed the yard in 3 long strides and kicked the pistol away, then leveled his rifle at Cole's head. "Don't!" Cole glared up at him, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You're dead! You hear me? When I get up from here, you're dead." "You're not getting up." Thomas glanced toward the scarred man, who was still on the ground, groaning and clutching his shoulder. "Neither is he. Your friend ran, and you're going to bleed out if you don't get that leg treated." "So shoot me," Cole spat. "Get it over with." Thomas stared down at him for a long moment. Then he lowered the rifle. "No." "What?" "I said no." Thomas turned and walked back toward the porch, his voice carrying over his shoulder. I'm not a killer, but if you ever come back here, if I ever see your face on my land again, I will be. Cole started to respond, but Thomas was already climbing the steps. He stopped in front of Eva, his expression unreadable. I told you to stay inside. I know, Eva said. Her whole body was trembling now, adrenaline crashing through her system like a flood. I couldn't just watch. Thomas looked at the pistol in her hands. You missed. I know that too. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face there and gone so fast Eva almost missed it. Come on, let's get inside before anyone else decides to show up. They retreated into the house. Mira was standing in the hallway, her face pale, her hands pressed against her mouth. When she saw Eva, she rushed forward and threw her arms around her. Don't ever do that again. I'm okay, Eva said, though her voice didn't sound convincing even to herself. Thomas moved to the window and looked out. Cole was trying to drag himself toward his horse, leaving a trail of blood in the dirt. The scarred man had managed to sit up, but didn't look like he'd be going anywhere fast. Their horses stood nearby, stamping nervously. They'll come back, Mira said quietly. You know they will. Maybe, Thomas said, but not today. He turned away from the window and started reloading his rifle. His hands were steady, practiced like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. Eva realized she knew almost nothing about this man who'd saved their lives twice now. Who are you? She asked suddenly. Really? Thomas didn't look up from his rifle. I already told you. No, you told us your name, but that's not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I was a soldier once, long time ago. Served in the war, saw things I wish I hadn't. When it was over, I came out here looking for peace. Found this land, built this house, married a good woman. Thought maybe I could leave all that blood behind. He clicked the last bullet into place. Turns out you can't run from what you are. And what are you? Eva asked. Thomas finally looked at her. His eyes were old, older than his face, older than his years. Someone who's seen too much dying to stand by and watch more of it. Outside, Cole had finally reached his horse. He hauled himself into the saddle with a grunt of pain, then turned the animal toward the horizon. The scarred man was still on the ground, but Cole didn't even look back. He just rode slow and unsteady until he disappeared into the heat shimmer. He's leaving, Mira said, surprise clear in her voice. For now, Thomas said. But he's not done. Men like that never are. Eva moved to the window and watched the scarred man slowly climb to his feet. He pressed one hand against his shoulder, his face twisted in agony, then started limping after Cole. His horse had wandered off during the shooting, and he didn't have the strength to catch it. He just walked, stumbling every few steps until he too vanished into the distance. The yard was empty now. Silent. The only evidence of what had happened was the blood soaking into the dirt and the bullet holes in the porch. What do we do now? Mira asked. Thomas set his rifle against the wall. Now we wait. See if they're smart enough to stay gone. And if they're not, then we finish it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Eva looked at Thomas, at this quiet, broken man who'd killed to protect them, and felt something shift inside her chest. Gratitude, yes. But also something deeper. Something that felt like understanding. They were all survivors here. All of them scarred in their own ways. And maybe that was enough to build something on. Or maybe it was just another lie people told themselves to make the darkness bearable. Either way, Eva wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance that this place, this lonely ranch in the middle of nowhere, might become something more than just a temporary shelter. It might become home. The sun climbed higher, baking the blood into the earth. Inside the house, Thomas made coffee while Eva and Mira sat at the table, their hands wrapped around warm cups they didn't drink. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say that the silence couldn't say better. Hours passed. The day grew hot, then hotter. Thomas moved through the house like a ghost, checking windows, cleaning his rifle, doing all the small tasks that kept a man occupied when his mind wouldn't settle. Eva watched him, studying the way he moved, careful, deliberate, like every action was measured against some internal scale only he could see. He's scared, Mira whispered. Eva nodded. She could see it too beneath the calm exterior. Thomas was waiting for the other boot to drop, waiting for Cole to come back with more men, more guns, more rage. We should leave, Mira said again, before we get him killed. Where would we go? I don't know, but staying here is only going to bring more trouble. Eva wanted to argue, wanted to say that they had as much right to be here as anyone. But the truth was, Mira was probably right. They were a liability, a target. As long as they stayed, Thomas was in danger. But the thought of leaving, of walking back out into that vast, pitiless wilderness, made Eva's chest tighten with something that felt like panic. She'd spent so much of her life running from her father's debts after he died, running from the men who'd tried to force her into marriage to settle those debts, running from the slavers who'd caught her and Mira on the road to California. She was so tired of running. Maybe it was time to stand still, even if standing still meant fighting. I'm not leaving, Eva said quietly. Mira looked at her. Eva, I mean it. I'm done running. If Cole comes back, then we'll deal with it, together. You're going to get us all killed. Maybe. Eva met her friend's eyes. But at least we'll die on our own terms. Mira stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and looked away. You're insane. Probably. I hate you. No, you don't. Mira's lips twitched almost a smile. No, I don't. Thomas returned to the main room carrying an armful of ammunition. He set it on the table and started organizing it into neat piles, rifle rounds, pistol rounds, shotgun shells. It was enough ammunition to fight a small war. How long have you been preparing for this? Eva asked. Ever since my wife died, Thomas said without looking up. This land, it's not friendly to people who can't defend themselves. I learned that the hard way. What happened to her? Mira asked gently. If you don't mind me asking. Thomas's hands stilled. For a moment, Eva thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, fever. Started small, just a cough, a little weakness, but it spread fast. By the time I realized how sick she was, it was too late. I rode to town for the doctor, but he was 3 days away dealing with an outbreak. When I got back, he swallowed hard. She was already gone, died alone in that bed back there, and I wasn't here to hold her hand. I'm sorry, Eva said. So am I. Thomas resumed organizing the ammunition. She deserved better than this place. Better than me. That's not true, Mira said. Isn't it? Thomas finally looked up and his eyes were hollow. I brought her out here promising her a good life, promised her safety, comfort, a future. Instead, she got loneliness and death. Some husband I turned out to be. You can't blame yourself for, can I? Thomas's voice was sharp now. Every decision I made led her here, every choice, and in the end, those choices killed her just as sure as the fever did. The room fell silent. Eva didn't know what to say. What could anyone say to that kind of guilt? Finally, Thomas stood. I'm going to check the perimeter, make sure they're really gone. You two stay inside, lock the door behind me. He picked up his rifle and walked out before either of them could respond. They heard his boots on the porch, then nothing. Mira looked at Eva. He's punishing himself. I know. He's been alone out here for 5 years carrying all that guilt. It's eating him alive. I know, Eva said again, but I don't think he knows how to stop. Through the window, they could see Thomas walking the fence line, his rifle over his shoulder, his head down. He looked like a man visiting his own grave. We can't save him, Mira said quietly. Maybe not. Eva stood and moved to the window. But maybe we can remind him what it's like to have something worth living for. Eva, I'm serious. Look at him. He's been dead inside for 5 years. Maybe we can help him find his way back. Mira joined her at the window. Together they watched Thomas disappear behind the barn. And what if we can't? Mira asked. What if he's too far gone? Then at least we tried. The afternoon dragged on. Heat pressed down on the ranch like a physical weight. Eva and Mira tried to make themselves useful, washing dishes, sweeping floors, mending clothes they found in the chest. Anything to keep their hands busy and their minds from spiraling into dark places. Thomas returned as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. He looked exhausted, his face drawn and pale beneath the tan. No sign of them, he said. They're gone. For now. For now, Eva echoed. Thomas nodded. I'll keep watch tonight, just in case. You need to sleep, Mira said. I'll sleep when they're dead or too far away to matter. He moved to the kitchen and started pulling out ingredients for dinner. You two should rest. Tomorrow, if they haven't come back, I'll take you to town. Get you somewhere safe. Eva felt something cold settle in her stomach. We're leaving. It's the smart thing to do. Those men know you're here now. They'll come back with more people, more guns, and when they do... Thomas shook his head. I can't protect you against an army. We're not asking you to protect us, Eva said. Yes, you are. That's exactly what you're asking. Thomas's voice was tired, resigned. And I want to. God help me, I do. But I'm one man with one rifle. That's not enough. Then teach us, Eva said suddenly. Teach us to shoot. Teach us to fight. Make us enough. Thomas looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking you to give us a chance, that's all. Just a chance. A chance to die. We're already dead if we leave, Eva said. Out there, we're just two women with nothing. We won't make it a week. But here, she gestured around the room. Here we have walls, water, food, you. That's more than we had yesterday, more than we've had in months. Thomas stared at her, then at Mira. Is this what you want too? Mira hesitated, then she nodded. I'm tired of running. If we're going to die, I'd rather die fighting. Thomas rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up again, he seemed older somehow. You're both insane. Probably, Eva said, echoing her earlier conversation with Mira. But we're also still alive, and we'd like to stay that way. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed a sound like something breaking. All right, fine. If you're going to stay, then we do this right. Tomorrow I teach you how to shoot properly, how to load, how to aim, how to kill, if you have to. And we fortify this place. Board up windows, set up defensive positions, stockpile supplies. If they come back, we'll be ready. Thank you, Eva said. Don't thank me yet. Thomas turned back to the stove. You might not survive what's coming. Hell, none of us might. But at least we'll go down swinging. That night, Eva lay awake again, listening to the house settle around her. Beside her, Mira slept fitfully, whimpering occasionally in her dreams. Eva wanted to comfort her, but didn't know how. How did you comfort someone when you were just as terrified as they were? She thought about Cole, about the way he'd looked at her in the wagon like she was meat, less than meat, property. The memory made her skin crawl, but beneath the revulsion was something else, something hot and sharp and deadly. Rage. She was angry. Angry at Cole for what he'd tried to do, angry at the world for allowing men like him to exist, angry at herself for being weak, for needing rescue, for not being strong enough to save herself. But anger was useless unless you did something with it. Eva slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway. Thomas was sitting on the porch, his rifle across his lap, staring out at the darkness. He didn't turn when she joined him. Can't sleep? He asked. No. Eva sat down on the step beside him. You haven't slept right in 5 years. Don't see that changing tonight. They sat in silence for a while. The night was cool, peaceful, a stark contrast to the violence of the morning. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. Another answered. Why'd you really let us stay? Eva asked quietly. Thomas didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was so low, Eva almost didn't hear him. Because turning you away would have made me just like them. And I can't be that person. Not again. Again. Thomas's jaw tightened. The war. I did things during the war that I can't take back. Things that haunt me every time I close my eyes. And when it was over, I promised myself I'd never hurt anyone again unless I had no choice. That I'd try to be better than what they made me. You are better, Eva said. Am I? Thomas finally looked at her. I killed a man this morning, put a bullet in him and watched him bleed. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved. That scares me more than anything Cole could do. Eva reached out and placed her hand on his. His skin was rough, calloused, the hands of a man who worked hard and asked for nothing. You protected us. There's no shame in that. Isn't there? Where's the line, Eva? Between protection and murder? Between defense and revenge? Because I'm standing on that line right now and I can't tell which side I'm on. You're on the right side, Eva said firmly. You're on the side of people who deserve to live. That's all that matters. Thomas looked down at their joined hands. Then slowly, he turned his palm up and squeezed her fingers. I hope you're right. I am. They sat like that for a long time, two damaged souls finding comfort in each other's presence. And for the first time since her father died, Eva felt something that might have been hope. Not for tomorrow. Tomorrow was uncertain, dangerous, possibly deadly. But for this moment, this quiet moment on a porch in the middle of nowhere, holding hands with a broken man who'd chosen to be better. That was enough. The stars wheeled overhead. The coyotes sang their lonely songs. And inside the house, Mira slept on, dreaming of freedom she'd almost forgotten existed. Dawn would come soon, and with it whatever fate had in store. But tonight, just for tonight, they were safe. And that was a miracle all its own. When the first light touched the horizon, Thomas was already up and moving. Eva heard him in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and the hiss of water on the stove. She extracted herself carefully from Mira's sleeping form and dressed quickly, her body stiff and aching from the previous day's violence. Her hands still trembled when she thought about pulling that trigger, about how close the bullet had come to Cole's head and how desperately she'd wanted it to connect. Thomas looked up when she entered the kitchen. He'd made coffee strong and bitter and pushed a cup across the table toward her without a word. Eva wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. Sleep at all? She asked. An hour, maybe. Thomas moved to the window and looked out at the emerging day. Been thinking about what you said last night, about learning to fight. And I meant what I said. If you're staying, you need to know how to defend yourself properly. No more wild shooting, no more panic. Out here, panic gets you killed faster than bullets. He turned to face her. But I need to know you're serious, both of you, because once we start down this road, there's no going back. We're serious, Eva said without hesitation. Then finish your coffee. We start in an hour. Mira emerged from the bedroom as Thomas was laying out weapons on the porch. Her eyes were swollen from sleep, her hair tangled, but there was a determined set to her jaw that Eva recognized. Mira might be scared, they all were, but she wasn't broken. Not yet. What's all this? Mira asked, eyeing the array of rifles, pistols, and shotguns spread across the weathered wood. Your education, Thomas said. He picked up a pistol, the same Colt he'd given Eva the night before. This is where we start. Simple, reliable 6 shots before you need to reload. You're going to learn every part of this weapon. How to load it clean, fix it if it jams. You're going to practice until you can do it in the dark, in the rain, with your hands shaking. Because when Cole comes back, and he will come back, you won't have the luxury of thinking. He handed the pistol to Mira, then picked up another and gave it to Eva. Feel the weight. Get comfortable with it. A gun is just a tool, but it's a tool that can save your life or end someone else's. You need to respect that. Eva turned the pistol over in her hands. In the morning light, it looked almost ordinary, just metal and wood-shaped and fitted together. But she could feel the potential in it, the compressed violence waiting to be unleashed. Now, Thomas said, moving to the edge of the porch. First rule of shooting stance. Your feet should be shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. You want a stable base because the gun's going to kick back when you fire. If you're off balance, you'll miss. He demonstrated his body settling into a position that looked both relaxed and ready. Eva and Mira tried to mimic him, adjusting their feet, their posture until Thomas nodded approval. Good. Now raise your weapon, both hands. Your dominant hand on the grip, your other hand supporting from below. Arms extended but not locked. Locked elbows will hurt when the gun kicks. You want some flex, some give. Eva raised her pistol, feeling the awkwardness of the position, the unnatural extension of her arms. Beside her, Mira did the same, her face tight with concentration. Aim with both eyes open if you can, Thomas continued. I know it feels wrong at first, but you need to see what's around your target, not just the target itself. Line up the front sight with the rear sight, put them both on your target, and squeeze, don't pull the trigger. He set up 3 bottles on the fence railing about 20 yards away. Those are your targets. We'll start close work our way back. Eva, you first. Eva stepped forward, her heart already racing. She raised the pistol, tried to remember everything Thomas had just said. Stance, grip, breathing, sight, picture. The bottle seemed impossibly small, impossibly far away. Breathe, Thomas said quietly from behind her. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Slow and steady. When you're ready, between breaths, squeeze. Eva inhaled, exhaled. The world narrowed to the bottle, the sights, the pressure of her finger on the trigger. She squeezed. The gun roared and bucked in her hands. The bottle remained intact. Dust kicked up 3 feet to the left. Again, Thomas said. Eva fired again. Another miss. And again. And again. By the 6th shot, her hands were shaking, her ears ringing despite the cloth Thomas had given them to stuff in their ears, and every bottle still stood untouched. Good, Thomas said. Eva lowered the gun and stared at him. I didn't hit anything. No, but you didn't panic. You kept your stance, you kept breathing, and you finished all 6 rounds. That's what matters right now. He took the pistol from her and handed it to Mira. Your turn. Mira stepped up, her face pale but determined. She raised the gun, adjusted her stance, and fired. Her first shot went wide, but her second clipped the edge of a bottle, sending it spinning off the fence. Her third shot missed, but her fourth shattered another bottle completely. Natural talent. Thomas observed something like approval in his voice. But don't let it make you cocky. Hitting bottles that aren't shooting back is different from hitting men who are. They practiced for hours. Thomas was patient but demanding, correcting their grips, their stances, their breathing over and over, until Eva's arms burned and her hands were raw from the gun's recoil. He taught them to reload quickly, counting down the seconds. 10 seconds is too long, that's 10 seconds you're defenseless. Until they could drop the cylinder, eject the spent shells, load fresh rounds, and snap it closed in under 5. The sun climbed higher, baking the yard in relentless heat. Sweat ran down Eva's back, soaked her borrowed dress, but she didn't stop. Neither did Mira. They fired until their ammunition ran low, until the fence railing was clear of bottles, until Thomas finally called a halt. That's enough for today, he said, gathering up the weapons. You did good, both of you. Eva flexed her sore hands. I still missed more than I hit. Today you did. Tomorrow you'll hit more. That's how it works. Thomas headed toward the house, then paused. There's something else you need to understand. Shooting a bottle is one thing. Shooting a person is something else entirely. When you aim at a man, you're not just pulling a trigger, you're ending a life. And that weight never leaves you, no matter how justified it was. I know, Eva said quietly. Do you... Thomas turned to face her fully. Because once you cross that line, you can't uncross it. You'll carry it with you forever, and I need to know you're ready for that. Eva met his eyes. If it's him or me, I'm ready. Thomas held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded and went inside. Mira sank down onto the porch steps, her face flushed. My arms feel like they're going to fall off. Mine too, Eva admitted, sitting beside her. They stayed there in silence, watching the heat shimmer rise from the distant plains. It was a harsh beauty, this land, all thorns and dust and endless sky. But there was something honest about it too. Out here you knew exactly where you stood. There were no illusions, no false promises, just survival or death. Do you think he's right? Mira asked after a while. About Cole coming back? Yes. When? I don't know. Soon, probably. He struck me as the type who doesn't let things go. Mira picked at a splinter in the porch step. I keep thinking about what Thomas said, about carrying it with you forever, about the weight. So do I. Are we really ready for that, to become killers? Eva considered the question. A week ago, the answer would have been an emphatic no. She'd been raised to believe that taking a life was the ultimate sin, that violence was always wrong, that there were other ways to solve problems. But that was before the wagon, before Cole's hands on her, before she'd realized that sometimes the world didn't give you choices, it just gave you bad options, and worse ones. I think, Eva said slowly, that I'm ready to survive, whatever that takes. Mira nodded, but she didn't look convinced. I wish we could just leave, go somewhere far away where men like Cole don't exist. There's no such place. I know, but I can still wish for it. Thomas called them in for lunch bread and dried meat and water from the well. They ate in silence, exhaustion settling over them like a blanket. Afterward, Thomas took them around the property, showing them the layout, the defensive positions, the places where attackers might approach. "If they come during the day, you'll see them from a long way off," he explained, pointing at the flat expanse surrounding the ranch. "That's good for us, but if they come at night or at dawn, we'll have maybe a minute's warning, so we sleep in shifts. One person always awake, always watching." "For how long?" Mira asked. "How long can we live like this?" Thomas didn't answer, because they all knew the truth. They couldn't live like this forever. Eventually something would have to give. Either Cole would come and they'd end it, or they'd have to leave, or they'd slowly go mad from the constant vigilance. There were no good endings here, only survivable ones. That night, Eva took the first watch. She sat on the porch with a rifle across her lap, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The plains were alive with sound crickets, distant coyotes, the whisper of wind through dry grass. It was peaceful, almost beautiful, if you could forget about the violence that saturated this place. She heard the door open behind her and turned to find Thomas stepping out. He'd changed into fresh clothes, his hair still damp from washing. "Thought you were sleeping," Eva said. "Tried. Couldn't." He sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Mind if I join you?" "It's your porch." They sat in silence for a while. Eva was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the quiet strength. She kept her eyes on the horizon, but her attention was divided. "You were good today," Thomas said eventually. "Natural, like I said about Mira, but you've got something she doesn't." "What's that?" "Anger." Thomas looked at her. "I can see it in you. The way you hold the gun, the way you aim. You're not just learning to shoot, you're learning to kill. And that anger is going to make you dangerous." Eva didn't deny it. "Is that a bad thing?" "Depends. Anger can keep you alive, can make you strong when you need to be. But it can also make you reckless, make you take risks you shouldn't take. Like staying here instead of running." "Maybe." Thomas smiled faintly. "But I'm not exactly one to talk about making smart decisions." "Why did you stay?" Eva asked. "After your wife died. Why not leave, start over somewhere else?" Thomas was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "Because leaving would have felt like abandoning her. This land, this house, it's all I have left of her. Her gardens out back all dried up now, her clothes in that chest, her books on that shelf. If I leave, I lose all of that, and I can't—" He swallowed hard. "I can't lose her twice." Eva felt her throat tighten. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's all right. It's good to talk about her. I don't talk to people much anymore. Don't see people much. Just me and the ghosts out here." "That sounds lonely." "It is." Thomas looked out at the darkness. "But lonely is safe. Lonely doesn't hurt you the way people can. Is that why you almost sent us away?" "Part of it. The other part is that I'm scared." He said it simply, without shame. "Scared that I'll let you down the way I let her down. Scared that I'll wake up one morning and find you both dead because I wasn't strong enough or smart enough or fast enough to protect you. That fear, it's worse than any bullet." Eva reached out and placed her hand over his. "You're not going to let us down." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because you're here. You could have turned us away, but you didn't. You could have handed us over to Cole, but you didn't. You're fighting for us even though it would be easier not to. That's not a man who lets people down." Thomas turned his hand over and laced his fingers through hers. "I hope you're right." They sat like that as the night deepened around them, holding hands like children afraid of the dark. And maybe they were afraid. Maybe they had every right to be. But fear was more bearable when you weren't facing it alone. The next 3 days passed in a strange rhythm. Practice, watch, sleep, repeat. Thomas drilled them relentlessly on shooting, reloading basic tactics. He taught them how to barricade doors, how to move through a room under fire, how to use furniture and walls as cover. He was patient but uncompromising, pushing them past exhaustion until their bodies moved on instinct rather than thought. Eva's shooting improved steadily. She learned to control her breathing, to anticipate the recoil, to trust her instincts. By the third day, she could hit a target at 30 yards more often than not. Mira was even better. Her natural eye and steady hands made her frighteningly accurate. But it wasn't just the shooting. They were changing in other ways too. Eva felt it in the way she carried herself, in the hardness that had crept into her thoughts. She was becoming someone new, someone capable of violence. And while part of her mourned the person she used to be, another part, a darker, fiercer part, welcomed the transformation. On the fourth morning, Thomas woke them before dawn. "Get dressed. We're going into town." "What?" Mira rubbed sleep from her eyes. "Why?" "Because we need supplies. Ammunition, food, medical supplies. And we need information. If Cole's gathering men for another attack, someone in town will know about it." "Is it safe?" Eva asked. "No, but neither is staying here with no ammunition and no food." Thomas handed them each a pistol. "Keep these on you at all times. Don't let anyone see them unless you have to, but don't hesitate to use them if it comes to that." The ride to town took 2 hours. Thomas drove the wagon while Eva and Mira sat in the back, their pistols hidden beneath their skirts. The landscape rolled past endless plains broken by occasional stands of mesquite and patches of prickly pear. It was beautiful in its own harsh way, but Eva couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The town, when they finally reached it, was little more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a dusty main street. A general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, a few houses. Maybe 50 people lived here, if that. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, where strangers stood out like blood on snow. Thomas pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and set the brake. "Stay close to me. Don't talk to anyone unless I do first. And if anything feels wrong, we leave immediately." "Understood." They nodded and followed him inside. The store was dim and close-smelling of tobacco and leather and something vaguely medicinal. A thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles stood behind the counter, and his eyes widened when he saw Thomas. "Tom Granger," the man said, surprise clear in his voice. "Been a while." "Sam," Thomas nodded. "Need to stock up on some supplies." Sure. Sam's gaze flicked to Eva and Mira, curiosity naked on his face. "These, friends of yours?" "They're staying with me for a while." Thomas set his tone, making it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. "I need ammunition. 44, 40, 45 Colt and 12-gauge shells. As much as you can spare." Sam's eyebrows climbed higher. "That's a lot of firepower, Tom. You expecting trouble?" "Just being prepared." "Right." Sam didn't look convinced, but he started pulling boxes down from the shelves behind him. "Heard some talk around town about a group of men looking for 2 women, offering good money for information." Eva felt her stomach drop. Beside her, Mira had gone very still. Thomas's expression didn't change. "That's so. Yep. Leader's got a bum leg, from what I hear. Said the women stole something valuable from him and he wants it back." Sam glanced at Eva and Mira again. "Funny how things line up sometimes, isn't it?" "Funny?" Thomas agreed flatly. He pulled money from his pocket and laid it on the counter. "The ammunition, Sam, and some dried goods, flour beans, coffee salt, enough for a few weeks." Sam hesitated. Then he sighed and started filling a sack. "Look, Tom, I don't want trouble, and I surely don't want to get involved in whatever this is. But those men, they're not the type to give up easy. They've been staying at the saloon asking questions, roughing up anyone who won't talk." "How many?" 6, maybe 7. Hard to tell, they keep to themselves mostly. 6 or 7. That was more than Eva had expected. Cole had gathered reinforcements. "When did they arrive?" Thomas asked. 2 days ago. They've been drinking, talking about heading out to ranches, searching property by property if they have to. Sam pushed the supplies across the counter. "I don't know what these girls did, Tom, but you might want to think hard about whether they're worth dying for." "I already did my thinking," Thomas said. He gathered up the supplies and turned to leave. "Tom," Sam's voice stopped him at the door. "Those men, they're killers. Professional guns, some of them. Whatever you're planning, it's not going to be enough." Thomas looked back at him. "Then I guess I'll die trying." They loaded the supplies into the wagon in tense silence. Eva kept expecting to see Cole emerge from the saloon, to hear his voice calling out across the street. But the town remained quiet, almost eerily so. As Thomas climbed onto the driver's seat, a figure stepped out of the alley beside the store. Eva's hand went to her pistol, but Thomas caught her wrist. "Easy," he murmured. The figure was a woman maybe 40 years old, with graying hair and a hard face. She approached the wagon slowly, her hands visible. "You're the ones they're looking for," she said without preamble. "The slaver's property." "We're not property," Eva said, her voice tight. "Didn't say you were. Said that's what they call you." The woman glanced back at the saloon. "They're planning to ride out tonight, going to hit the ranches west of here, starting with the Granger place." "Why are you telling us this?" Thomas asked. "Because I know what it's like to run from men like that. And because Sam in there might be too much of a coward to help, but I'm not." She pulled something from her pocket, a small Derringer pistol, and handed it to Mira. "This won't stop them, but it might buy you a few seconds. That's all I can offer." "Thank you," Mira whispered. The woman nodded once, then melted back into the alley and was gone. Thomas snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. They rode out of town at a pace just shy of panic, the wheels kicking up dust behind them. Nobody spoke until the town had disappeared behind a low rise. "Tonight," Eva said. "They're coming tonight." "I heard," Thomas said grimly. "We've got maybe 6 hours to prepare." 6 or 7 men against 3 of us, Mira said. "Thomas, we can't." "We can and we will." Thomas's voice was iron. "We've got the high ground, we know the terrain, and we've got surprise on our side. They think we're easy prey. We're going to show them different." "Or we're going to die," Eva said quietly. "Maybe, but like you said before, at least we'll die on our own terms." They rode in silence for a while. Then Mira said, "The woman back there, she called us property. Is that how people see us, as things to be owned?" "Some people," Thomas said. "The wrong people, but not everyone. Not her, and not me." Eva stared out at the planes rolling past. Somewhere out there, Cole was gathering his men, checking his weapons, planning his attack. And tonight, when the sun set and darkness covered the land, there would be blood. She thought about the person she'd been just a week ago, naive, hopeful, still believing that good things happen to good people. That girl was gone, now burned away in the back of a wagon. The woman who remained was harder, colder, forged in fire and fear. But she was a survivor. And if Cole wanted to take that from her, he'd have to kill her first. And she had no intention of dying quietly. The ranch appeared on the horizon, small and vulnerable in the vast emptiness. As they drew closer, Eva could see the bullet holes still poking the porch, the bloodstains still dark in the dirt. Tonight would bring more blood, more death. But maybe, just maybe, it would also bring an ending. And endings, Eva had learned, were precious things, even violent ones. They worked through the afternoon like people preparing for their own funeral. Thomas moved with grim efficiency, boarding up windows on the ground floor, reinforcing the front door with crossbeams, setting up firing positions that would give them the best angles on anyone approaching the house. Eva and Mira helped where they could, hauling furniture, loading weapons, filling every bucket and basin they could find with water in case fire became part of the equation. "They'll try to burn us out," Thomas said as he wedged another board across the kitchen window. "It's what I do. Smoke us out, pick us off as we run. So we need water everywhere, wet blankets ready to smother flames. And if it comes to it, we go out through the root cellar. There's a tunnel that leads about 50 yards from the house, my wife's idea back when Comanche raids were still a concern." "You never mentioned a tunnel," Eva said. "Didn't seem relevant until now." Thomas tested the board, making sure it was secure. "But if things go bad up here, you two use it. Get to the horses, ride hard for town. Don't stop, don't look back, just ride." "What about you?" Mira asked. "I'll buy you time." "No." Eva's voice was sharp. "We're not leaving you to die alone. You will if I tell you to." Thomas turned to face them, and his expression was harder than Eva had ever seen it. "Listen to me. If tonight goes the way I think it might, one of us needs to survive to tell what happened here. To make sure Cole and his men don't just ride away and do this to someone else. You two are young, you've got your whole lives ahead of you. I'm just an old soldier who's been dead inside for 5 years anyway." "Stop it," Eva said fiercely. "Stop talking like you're already gone. We fight together, or we don't fight at all." Thomas stared at her, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "Together then. But you follow my orders when the time comes. No arguments, no hesitation. Understood. Understood. Eva said, though she had no intention of abandoning him when it mattered most. The sun crawled toward the horizon with agonizing slowness. They ate an early dinner. Nobody was hungry, but Thomas insisted they needed the strength. The food tasted like ash in Eva's mouth. She forced it down anyway, washing it with bitter coffee that did nothing to calm her nerves. As the light began to fail, Thomas gathered them in the main room and laid out his plan. They'll come from the west using the setting sun to hide their approach. That means our best line of sight will be from the upstairs windows on the east side of the house. We'll see their shadows before we see them. Eva, you'll be upstairs with the rifle. Mira, you're with me down here covering the front. We let them get close within 30 yards if possible. The closer they are, the harder it is to miss. And then, Mira's voice was steady, but Eva could see her hands shaking. Then we make every shot count. We're outnumbered, so we can't afford to waste ammunition. Aim for center mass, the chest is the biggest target. Don't try for headshots unless you're absolutely sure. And remember, once you start shooting, you don't stop until they're down or they're running. Hesitation will get you killed. Eva nodded, her mouth dry. She'd been preparing for this moment for days, but now that it was here, the reality of it hit her like a fist to the stomach. In a few hours, she would try to kill men. Human beings with lives and histories and people who might mourn them. The weight of that settled over her like a shroud. Thomas seemed to sense her thoughts. It's not murder, he said quietly. It's survival. They're coming here to take you to hurt you, probably to kill me. You didn't start this fight, but you're going to finish it. And there's no shame in that. I know, Eva said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, and darkness rushed in to fill the void. Thomas extinguished all the lamps, plunging the house into blackness, broken only by faint starlight filtering through the cracks in the boarded windows. They took their positions in silence, Eva climbing the stairs to the small bedroom that overlooked the western approach, Mira and Thomas settling behind furniture they'd repositioned to create a makeshift barricade. Eva knelt by the window, rifle in hand, and stared out at the night. The plains were a sea of shadow shapes that might have been bushes or rocks or men creeping closer. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure Thomas could hear it downstairs. She tried to breathe the way he'd taught her, slow, steady in through the nose and out through the mouth, but her lungs felt like they'd forgotten how. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it was only minutes. Time had lost all meaning in the dark. Eva's eyes ached from straining to see movement where there might be none. Twice she almost called out, certain she'd spotted riders, only to realize it was just the wind stirring brush. Then, just as she was beginning to think the woman in town had been wrong, she saw them. 7 riders, black silhouettes against the slightly lighter sky, moving slowly and deliberately toward the house. They were still a quarter-mile out, spread in a loose line, but even from this distance, Eva recognized Cole's bulk in the center. They were coming. Thomas, she called down softly. West side. 7 riders. I see them. Thomas's voice drifted up from below, calm and steady. Hold your fire. Let them come. The riders drew closer, taking their time. They knew the house was there. They'd probably been watching it all afternoon from some distant vantage point. Now they were moving in for the kill, confident in their numbers, in their firepower, in the inevitability of their victory. At 200 yards, they stopped. Eva watched through a crack in the boards as the riders clustered together, clearly conferring. Then 3 of them dismounted and started walking toward the house on foot, while the other 4 held back with the horses. Smart, Eva thought. They were being cautious, sending only part of their force forward to test the defenses. That meant they weren't as confident as she'd feared. Or maybe it just meant they'd learned from their last encounter with Thomas. The 3 men approached slowly, weapons drawn, scanning the house for any sign of life. The man in front was Cole. Eva could tell by his limping gait, the leg Thomas had shot still giving him trouble. Behind him came the scarred man from before his shoulder, heavily bandaged, and a third man Eva didn't recognize, tall and lean with a rifle held ready. At 50 yards, Cole called out, Granger, I know you're in there, and I know you got my property with you. Silence from the house. This doesn't have to get ugly, Cole continued. Just send the girls out and we'll leave you be. You got my word on that. Still nothing. Come on now, be reasonable. You're outnumbered and outgunned. There's no way you're walking away from this if you insist on being stupid. Cole's voice hardened. Last chance, Granger. Send them out, or we burn you out. Thomas's voice rang out from somewhere below, strong and clear. You want them. Come and get them. Cole laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that carried across the dark yard. Have it your way. He gestured to his companions, and all three men raised their weapons and opened fire. The night exploded into chaos. Bullets slammed into the house, punching through boards, shattering glass, filling the air with splinters and smoke. Eva pressed herself against the floor, her heart in her throat, as rounds tore through the walls, inches above her head. Below she heard Thomas and Mira returning fire, the crack of pistols, and the deeper boom of Thomas's rifle. Eva forced herself up to her knees and peered through the gap in the boards. The three men had spread out and were advancing behind what cover they could find: water troughs, fence posts, anything that might stop a bullet. She tracked Cole's movement, her rifle heavy in her shaking hands. Breathe, she told herself, just like practice. Breathe and squeeze. She lined up the shot and fired. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Through the smoke, she saw Cole stumble and go down. For one wild moment, she thought she'd killed him, but then he was up again, dragging himself behind the water trough, one hand pressed against his side. She'd hit him. Actually, hit him. No time to process that. The other two men were firing at the house with renewed fury, clearly trying to suppress whoever had just shot their leader. Eva worked the rifle's bolt, chambering another round, and aimed at the scarred man. Squeezed. Missed. The bullet sparked off the fence post he was hiding behind. Below Thomas's rifle boomed twice in quick succession. The tall man with the rifle went down hard and didn't get up. That left Cole and the scarred man pinned down in the yard, and four more riders at the edge of the property. They're pulling back, Thomas called up. Eva, watch the flanks. They might try to circle around. Eva scrambled to the other window and looked out. Sure enough, two of the mounted riders were moving north, trying to get around to the side of the house where there were fewer boards over the windows. She tracked them with her rifle but held her fire. They were too far, moving too fast. Better to wait until they committed. The two men who'd been pinned down in the yard made a break for it, running in a crouch back toward their horses. Thomas fired once but missed. Then they were gone, swallowed by darkness. Silence fell like a weight. Eva's ears rang from the gunfire, and the air in the upstairs room was thick with smoke. She coughed, her eyes watering, and tried to see what was happening. Everyone okay? Thomas called. I'm fine, Eva answered. Me too, Mira added, though her voice was shaky. They're regrouping, Thomas said. This was just a probe testing our defenses. The real attack is coming. He was right. 5 minutes later, Eva heard the thunder of hooves and saw all 7 riders charging the house at once, firing as they came. It was chaos, muzzle flashes and the dark bullets everywhere, the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass. Eva fired as fast as she could work the bolt, not bothering to aim properly, just trying to throw lead in their direction. One of the riders went down his horse, screaming and rearing. Another veered off, clutching his arm. But the rest kept coming, and then they were at the house, dismounting, trying to force the doors and windows. Fall back, Thomas shouted. Eva, get down here now. Eva grabbed the rifle and ran for the stairs. Behind her, she heard glass breaking, heard boots hitting the floor. They were inside. She hit the stairs at a run and nearly collided with Mira at the bottom. Thomas was there, his face grim, a pistol in each hand. Root cellar, now. But now. They ran through the kitchen to the small door that led down to the root cellar. Thomas pulled it open and practically shoved them through. Eva stumbled down the steep stairs into darkness, Mira right behind her. Above, she heard Thomas slam the door shut and drag something heavy over it. The cellar was pitch black and smelled of earth and preserves. Eva felt along the wall, her hands finding rough stone until Mira grabbed her arm. There, Mira whispered, pointing at a faint sliver of lesser darkness. The tunnel. They moved toward it, feeling their way through the blackness. Behind and above them, they could hear muffled shouts, more gunfire, the heavy tread of boots on wooden floors. Thomas was up there alone, fighting God knew how many men. We have to go back, Eva said. We can't leave him. He told us to run. I don't care what he told us. Eva turned back toward the cellar stairs, but Mira caught her wrist. Eva, wait. Listen. Eva froze. The sounds from above had changed. The gunfire had stopped. Now there were only voices, angry, barking orders. And then a single shot, loud and final. Silence. Eva's blood turned to ice. "Thomas?" she breathed. They waited, every muscle tensed, barely breathing. Footsteps crossed the floor above them. Someone was searching the house, moving from room to room. "Find them." Cole's voice drifted down through the floorboards. "Search everywhere. They're here somewhere." More footsteps. Closer now, moving toward the kitchen. "The cellar," another voice said. "Check the cellar." Mira's hand tightened on Eva's arm. They had seconds, maybe less. "Go," Eva whispered. "The tunnel. Go." They moved as quietly as they could toward the dark opening, feeling their way along the rough walls. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, the ceiling so low they had to crawl. Behind them, they heard the cellar door bang open, heard boots on the stairs. "There's a tunnel!" someone shouted. "They're in the tunnel!" Eva and Mira scrambled forward on hands and knees, ignoring the rocks that tore at their palms, the roots that snagged their hair. Behind them, they could hear men entering the tunnel, cursing in the darkness. The tunnel seemed to go on forever. Eva's lungs burned, her hands were slick with blood, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant capture, and capture meant worse than death. Then suddenly, fresh air, cool and clean and impossible. Eva burst out of the tunnel into starlight and gasped, her body shaking. Mira emerged a moment later, and they both rolled away from the opening just as a hand reached out of the darkness. Eva raised her pistol. She'd somehow managed to keep hold of it through the crawl and fired down into the tunnel. There was a scream, and the hand withdrew. "Run!" Eva gasped. They ran, stumbling through the darkness toward where they hoped the horses would be. Behind them, more men emerged from the tunnel. Shots rang out, bullets whining past them in the dark. Eva's foot caught on something, and she went down hard, the pistol flying from her hand. She scrambled for it, her fingers closing around cold metal just as someone grabbed her ankle and yanked. She rolled onto her back and saw the scarred man looming over her, his face twisted with rage. He raised his gun, and Eva knew with crystal clarity that she was about to die. Then Mira appeared out of nowhere and slammed into him from the side. They went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of the gun. Eva lurched to her feet and pointed her pistol at the writhing mass, but she couldn't get a clear shot. The gun went off. Someone screamed. The scarred man went limp. Mira pulled herself free, blood on her hands, horror on her face. "I killed him," she whispered. "I actually killed him." "Good," Eva said, though her voice was shaking. "Come on." They found the horses exactly where Thomas said they'd be, tied to a post near the barn. Eva could see the house now silhouetted against the stars, and her heart broke. Smoke was rising from one corner. They'd set it on fire just like Thomas had predicted. And somewhere in that burning house, Thomas was either dead or dying. "We have to go back for him," Eva said. "Eva, we can't. There are too many of them." "I don't care." "He's probably already dead, and if we go back, we'll be dead too. That's not what he wanted. He wanted us to live." Eva stared at the burning house, tears streaming down her face. Mira was right. She knew Mira was right, but the thought of leaving Thomas there, of running away while he burned, felt like tearing her own heart out. "Please," Mira said softly. "We have to go. Now." Hoofbeats behind them. Cole's men coming around the side of the house. Out of time. Eva swung up onto a horse, pulled Mira up behind her, and kicked hard. The horse leaped forward, carrying them away from the burning house, away from the men and the guns and the smoke, away from Thomas. They rode hard through the darkness, expecting any moment to hear pursuit behind them. But the night remained empty except for their own pounding hoofbeats and ragged breathing. Maybe Cole had decided they weren't worth chasing. Maybe he thought they'd die in the desert anyway. Or maybe he was just too busy celebrating his victory. The horse finally slowed its sides, heaving foam, flecking its mouth. Eva let it walk, too exhausted to push anymore. Beside her, Mira was crying silently, her face pressed against Eva's back. "We're alive," Eva said, though the words tasted like ashes. "We survived." "At what cost?" Mira whispered. Eva didn't answer. Because the cost was everything. Their safety, their sanctuary, and the man who'd given them both. Thomas was gone, and they were alone again. The town appeared on the horizon just as dawn broke. Eva rode straight to the general store, not caring any more about caution or discretion. She slid off the horse and pounded on the door until Sam appeared, rubbing sleep from his eyes. They attacked, Eva said without preamble. They burned the house. Thomas is dead. Sam's eyes widened. Jesus, how many of them? 7, maybe more now. Eva swayed on her feet, exhaustion finally catching up with her. They're going to come here next, looking for us. Then you need to leave, right now, before they… No. Eva's voice was iron. No more running. We end this, today. Sam stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Girl, you can't fight 7 men. That's suicide. Then it's suicide. Eva turned to Mira. I'm going back. You don't have to come with me. But I'm going back and I'm going to kill every last one of them. Mira looked at her for a long moment, then she nodded. Together. You're both insane, Sam said, but he was already moving, pulling down boxes from his shelves. All right. If you're determined to get yourselves killed, at least do it properly. Take this ammunition and this rifle, and for God's sake, aim for the ones with guns first. The woman who'd helped them before materialized from somewhere in the back of the store. I'm coming too, she said. Ma'am, you don't have to… Eva started. I know I don't have to, but my daughter was taken by men like that 5 years ago. I never saw her again. The woman's face was hard as flint. So yeah, I'm coming. One by one, others emerged. The blacksmith, the saloon owner, even the nervous young deputy who'd been too scared to do anything when Cole first rode into town. 7 people total, armed with whatever weapons they could find. Cole's at the Granger place, Sam said. Probably drinking and celebrating. They won't expect anyone to come after them. Good, Eva said. Then we have surprise on our side. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, 8 people on a mission of vengeance. Eva knew they might all die today. Probably would die. But she'd meant what she said, no more running. This ended now one way or another. The Granger house came into view, still smoldering black smoke rising into the clear morning sky. Eva's hands tightened on the reins. Somewhere in that wreckage was the man who'd saved her life, who'd taught her to fight, who'd died protecting her. Cole was going to pay for that. In blood. They dismounted a quarter-mile out and approached on foot using the same tactics Thomas had taught her. Sam and the blacksmith circled around to the north. The woman and 2 others went south. Eva, Mira, and the deputy came straight up the middle. Through the smoke, Eva could see figures moving in the yard. 3 men, maybe 4. The rest were probably inside what remained of the house, picking through the ruins. Eva raised her rifle and sighted down the barrel. Her hands were steady now. No fear, no doubt. Just cold, clear purpose. She squeezed the trigger. The man went down. Before his companions could react, Eva had chambered another round and fired again. Another man dropped. Then all hell broke loose again, but this time Eva welcomed it. She fired, just like Thomas had taught her. Beside her, Mira was doing the same, her face set in grim determination. The battle was short and brutal. Cole's men, caught off guard and hung over, tried to mount a defense, but were overwhelmed by the coordinated attack. Within minutes, 3 were dead, 2 were wounded, and the rest had surrendered, all except Cole. Eva found him trying to limp away toward the horses. She walked up behind him and pressed her pistol against the back of his head. Don't, she said quietly. Cole froze. Then slowly he turned around. Blood stained his side where she'd shot him the night before, and his face was gray with pain, but his eyes were still full of hate. Go ahead, he spat. Do it. Make yourself a murderer. Eva stared at him. She thought about the wagon, about his hands on her, about Mira's terror, about Thomas dying alone in that burning house. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she didn't pull it. No, she said finally. You're not worth it. She lowered the gun and stepped back. Deputy, take him. He's going to stand trial for murder, kidnapping, and everything else we can think of. The deputy moved forward with rope, and Cole's face twisted with impotent rage. This isn't over, he snarled at Eva. I'll get out, and when I do… You won't, Eva said flatly, and even if you do, I'll be ready. They bound Cole and the other survivors and loaded them into a wagon. As the townspeople started the long ride back, Eva and Mira stayed behind, standing in the yard of the ruined house. The fire had burned itself out, leaving only blackened timbers and ash. Eva walked through the wreckage, slowly searching. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it, Thomas's rifle, scorched, but intact, lying near what had been the doorway. She picked it up, her vision blurring with tears she'd been holding back for hours. "He's really gone," Mira said softly. "Yeah," Eva's voice broke. "He is." They stood together in the ruins, two young women who'd survived the unsurvivable and wept for the man who'd made that survival possible. Eva clutched Thomas's rifle to her chest as the sun climbed higher, turning the smoke-filled air golden. The ruins of the house stood like a monument to violence, to sacrifice, to all the things the frontier took and never gave back. She wanted to stay there forever, rooted to that spot, as if leaving would somehow make Thomas's death more final, more real. But Mira's hand on her shoulder pulled her back. "Eva, we should look, before we leave. We need to know for certain." Eva understood what she meant. They needed to find Thomas's body, needed to see with their own eyes that he was truly gone, and not somehow miraculously still alive. It was a fool's hope, but hope nonetheless. They moved through the wreckage, carefully stepping over charred beams and melted glass. The heat still radiated from the blackened wood, making the air shimmer. Eva's throat tightened as she recognized pieces of the life Thomas had built. Here, the iron skillet he'd used to make them breakfast, now warped and useless. The books from his shelf reduced to ash. His wife's chest split open and empty, its contents scattered and burned. 5 years he'd lived here with his ghosts, and now even the ghosts were gone. They searched the main room, then the kitchen, then what remained of the bedroom. But there was no body, no sign of Thomas at all except for his rifle, which Eva still held like a talisman. "Maybe he got out," Mira said, but her voice held no conviction. "Maybe," Eva said, though she didn't believe it either. They were turning to leave when Eva heard a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the creak of settling timbers. A groan, human and unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Eva spun around, scanning the ruins. "There." Mira pointed to the far corner where the root cellar door lay at an angle, partially collapsed. Something moved. They ran to the door and together heaved it aside. Smoke billowed out of the opening and Eva coughed, her eyes streaming. Through the haze she could just make out a shape at the bottom of the stairs. Thomas. He was alive. Eva practically fell down the stairs in her haste to reach him. He lay crumpled against the stone wall, his shirt soaked with blood, his face gray with pain and smoke inhalation. But his eyes opened when she touched his shoulder, and recognition flickered there. "Eva," he rasped, you should be gone." "We tried," Eva said, her voice breaking. "We came back. We killed them, Thomas. Cole and his men, it's over." "You came back." Thomas coughed and blood flecked his lips. "Foolish. Could have been killed. So could you. Looks like you nearly were." Eva carefully examined his wounds. There was a bullet hole in his upper chest, another in his side. How he was still alive she couldn't fathom. "We need to get you out of here. Mira, help me." Between them they managed to half-carry, half-drag Thomas up the cellar stairs and out into the yard. He bit back sounds of pain the entire way, his face going whiter with each step. By the time they lowered him to the ground in the shade of the one surviving tree, he was barely conscious. "He's losing too much blood," Mira said, panic creeping into her voice. "Eva, we need a doctor. Now. Town's 2 hours away. He won't make it." Eva pressed her hands against the worst of the wounds, feeling hot blood pulse between her fingers. She'd watched her father die from a gut wound when she was 16, had seen how quickly life could drain away. Thomas had minutes, not hours. Unless. Eva looked up at Mira. "The supplies. From the wagon. Did they burn?" "I don't know. I'll look." Mira took off, running toward where they'd left the wagon the night before. Eva turned back to Thomas. His eyes were closed now, his breathing shallow and irregular. "Thomas, stay with me. You hear me? You don't get to die after we just saved you." His eyes cracked open. "Stubborn," he whispered. "You taught me well." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, there and gone. "My wife would have liked you, both of you." You can tell her about us yourself, later, when you're old and gray and dying in bed like a normal person. Too late for that. Thomas's hand found hers gripped weakly. Eva, listen. No, save your strength. Listen. His voice was firmer now, urgent. The deed. To this place, in the barn, false floorboard, under the workbench. It's yours now, both of you. You need somewhere to be safe. Thomas, stop. Let me finish. He coughed again, his whole body shaking with the effort. Build something here. Something better than what I had. Promise me. Eva felt tears streaming down her face. I promise. But you're going to help us. You're not dying today. Everyone dies. Eventually. Not today, Eva said fiercely. Not you. Not after everything. Mira returned at a run, her arms full of supplies that had somehow survived in the wagon. I found the medical kit. And whiskey. They worked together with desperate efficiency, cleaning the wounds as best they could, packing them with cloth torn from their dresses, binding everything tight with strips of bandage from the kit. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness through it all, occasionally gasping in pain, but mostly just lying still, his skin cold and clammy to the touch. When they finished, Eva sat back on her heels and looked at their handiwork. It was crude, probably inadequate, but it was all they had. The bleeding had slowed to a seep. That was something. Maybe enough. We need to get him to town, Mira said. He needs a real doctor. Can he even survive the journey? Can he survive staying here? Eva looked around at the ruins, at the exposed landscape, offering no shelter from the elements at the blood-soaked ground. Mira was right. Staying meant certain death. At least moving gave them a chance. They fashioned a travois from broken fence posts and canvas, padded it with blankets, and carefully loaded Thomas onto it. He groaned, but didn't wake. Eva tied the travois to one of the horses, then helped Mira mount the other. Let's go, Eva said, and let's pray we're fast enough. The ride to town was the longest 2 hours of Eva's life. She kept one eye on the travois behind her horse, terrified that at any moment it would catch on something and spill Thomas onto the hard ground. Every rut in the trail, every stone, every dip made her heart seize. Behind her, she could hear Thomas's labored breathing, could hear him occasionally murmur things that made no sense. His wife's name, fragments of orders from his war days, sometimes just wordless sounds of pain. Hold on, Eva whispered over and over like a prayer. Just hold on. The town appeared on the horizon like salvation. Eva kicked her horse faster, not caring anymore about the rough trail or Thomas's wounds reopening. Speed was everything now. Speed was life. They thundered into the main street, Eva shouting for the doctor before she'd even dismounted. People came running from all directions, drawn by the commotion. Sam emerged from his store, his eyes widening when he saw Thomas on the travois. Jesus Christ, I thought he was dead. Not yet, Eva said. Where's the doctor? End of the street, White House, I'll get him. Sam took off at a run. Willing hands helped them carry Thomas inside the doctor's house. The doctor himself, a thin, balding man in his 50s, took one look at Thomas and started barking orders. Eva and Mira found themselves pushed aside as the doctor and his wife went to work, cutting away bandages, probing wounds, muttering to each other in medical terminology Eva didn't understand. They waited in the next room, sitting on hard wooden chairs, their hands clasped together. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say. Either Thomas would live or he wouldn't, and all the words in the world couldn't change that. The woman who'd helped them during the fight appeared with coffee and bread. Thought you girls might need this, she said softly. It's going to be a long wait. Thank you, Mira said, accepting the cup with shaking hands. For everything, for helping us fight. Should have done it sooner. Should have done it when Cole first rode into town. The woman sat down across from them. I'm Martha, by the way. Don't think we ever properly introduced ourselves in all the chaos. Eva. And this is Mira. Martha nodded. The deputy took Cole and the others to the territorial marshal this morning. They'll hang most likely. Justice moves fast out here when the evidence is clear. Good, Eva said, and meant it. She felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. just a hollow relief that at least those particular monsters wouldn't hurt anyone else. "What will you do?" Martha asked. "After. Assuming Thomas—" She didn't finish the sentence. Eva looked at Mira. "We rebuild. Thomas gave us his land, said we should build something there." "Out of the ashes," Mira said quietly. "Yeah, out of the ashes." Martha studied them both for a long moment. "You're stronger than you look, you two. Stronger than most people I've met. This frontier, it breaks people, grinds them down until there's nothing left. But you—" She shook her head. "You're going to be just fine." Hours crawled past. The sun traced its arc across the sky, afternoon bleeding into evening. The doctor emerged once his sleeves rolled up and stained with blood to tell them that Thomas was still alive, still fighting, but that the next few hours would be critical. Then he disappeared back into the sick room, leaving them to their vigil. Eva dozed fitfully in her chair, her dreams full of fire and gunshots, and Thomas's voice telling her to run. She woke with a start each time, her heart pounding, convinced that the doctor had emerged with bad news. But the door remained closed, and the only sounds were the tick of the clock and Mira's soft breathing beside her. Night fell. Martha brought more coffee and insisted they eat something. Eva forced down bread that tasted like sawdust and tried not to think about what would happen if Thomas died. He'd been more than their protector. He'd been their anchor, the fixed point around which they could orient themselves in this chaotic, violent world. Without him, they would be adrift again. Alone again. "He's gonna make it," Mira said, as if reading her thoughts. "He's too stubborn to die." "We're all too stubborn to die," Eva said. "Didn't stop us from nearly dying anyway." "But we didn't. That's what matters." The door to the sick room finally opened near midnight. The doctor emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth, his face drawn with exhaustion. Eva and Mira shot to their feet. "He's alive," the doctor said, and Eva felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. "Barely, but alive. The bullets did a lot of damage, but I managed to get them both out and repair what I could. Whether he survives the night—" He shrugged helplessly. "That's up to him now, and to whatever higher power you believe in." "Can we see him?" Eva asked. "Briefly. He's unconscious and needs rest. But yes, briefly." They entered the sick room on trembling legs. Thomas lay on a narrow bed, so pale he might have been a corpse except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest beneath heavy bandages. His face was slack, empty of the strength and determination that usually defined it. He looked smaller, somehow diminished by pain and blood loss. Eva moved to his side and took his hand. It was cold, lifeless. She squeezed gently, willing some of her own warmth into him. "We're here," she whispered. "We're not going anywhere. So you fight, you hear me? Fight and you live because we need you." Thomas didn't respond. Didn't so much as twitch, but his hand remained in hers, and Eva chose to believe that meant something. Mira stood on the other side of the bed, her eyes red-rimmed. "You gave us a home," she said softly. "Now let us give you a reason to come back to it." They stayed until the doctor gently ushered them out, insisting that Thomas needed undisturbed rest. Martha had prepared a room for them at the boarding house, 2 beds, clean sheets, a window that looked out over the quiet street. It was simple, safe, more than they'd had in weeks. Eva lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mira's breathing, steady into sleep. She thought about the past week, about the wagon and the escape, and Thomas's ranch, and the violence that had consumed everything. She thought about the person she'd been before all of this and the person she was becoming. They felt like different people, entirely separated by more than just days and miles. The old Eva would have been horrified by what the new Eva had done, would have wept at the memory of pulling that trigger, of watching men fall, of feeling satisfaction at their deaths. But the old Eva had been naive, sheltered, unprepared for the reality of a world that took and gave nothing back. The new Eva understood something the old one never had, that survival sometimes required violence, that mercy was a luxury you could only afford when you weren't fighting for your life, and that strength wasn't something you were born with, but something you forged in fire. She wasn't sure she liked this new version of herself, but she was alive because of it, and that had to count for something. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Eva and Mira spent their mornings at the doctor's house, sitting with Thomas, who remained unconscious but stable. His color improved slightly, and the doctor seemed cautiously optimistic, but he warned them that infection was still a risk, that Thomas wasn't out of danger yet. In the afternoons, they helped around town, working in Martha's kitchen, mending clothes, doing odd jobs in exchange for room and board. The townspeople treated them with a mixture of respect and wariness, as if unsure how to categorize two young women who'd survived what they'd survived and fought the way they'd fought. On the fourth day, Thomas woke up. Eva was sitting beside his bed, reading aloud from one of the few books the doctor owned, when Thomas's eyes fluttered open. She stopped mid-sentence, hardly daring to breathe. "Eva," Thomas rasped, his voice barely audible. "I'm here." Eva set the book aside and leaned closer. "Don't try to talk. You've been unconscious for days. The doctor says you need rest. The girls, you and Mira, we're fine. We're both fine. You're the one who nearly died." Thomas managed a weak smile. "Tried to. You wouldn't let me." "Damn right we wouldn't." Eva felt tears welling up and didn't bother to hide them. "You scared us half to death, Thomas. Don't do that again." "I'll try." His eyes drifted closed again, but his breathing remained steady, peaceful. Not the shallow gasps of before, but real sleep. Eva sat back in her chair, her whole body sagging with relief. He was going to make it. They were all going to make it. When the doctor examined Thomas later that day and declared him past the worst of it, Eva felt something unlock in her chest, something tight and painful that had been there since the night of the fire. Thomas would need weeks to recover fully, the doctor said. But barring complications, he would live. That evening, Eva and Mira walked to the edge of town and looked out at the plains stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, Thomas's ranch lay in ruins. But ruins could be rebuilt. Ashes could give birth to something new. When Thomas is well enough to travel, Eva said, "We'll go back. We'll rebuild the house. Plant crops. Raise horses, maybe. Build a life," Mira added. "Yeah. Build a life." Eva turned to her friend. "Are you sure you want to stay? You could go to California like you planned, find your sister, start fresh somewhere without all these memories." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My sister probably doesn't even remember me. We were separated when I was 8. That was 15 years ago. California is just a dream I've been chasing because I didn't have anything real to hold on to." She looked at Eva. "But this you, Thomas, that land, this is real. This is something I can build on. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Eva smiled and linked her arm through Mira's. "Then we do it together, the three of us. We build something better than what was there before." "Something that lasts," Ghost Mira agreed. 2 weeks later, Thomas was strong enough to travel. The doctor protested, insisting he needed more time, but Thomas was adamant. "I've been dying slowly in this bed for 14 days, he said. "If I'm going to heal, I'll heal at home, or what's left of it." They loaded a wagon with supplies. Lumber nails, canvas, food seed, everything they would need to start over. The townspeople contributed what they could, partly out of genuine goodwill, and partly Eva suspected out of guilt for not acting sooner against Cole. Martha gave them chickens. Sam donated extra ammunition just in case. The blacksmith threw in tools. By the time they left, the wagon was overflowing, and Eva felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite hope. Hope was still too fragile, too easily crushed. But possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a future worth reaching for. The ride back to the ranch was slow, careful. Thomas stretched out in the back of the wagon, cushioned by blankets. He slept most of the way, his body still mending, but occasionally he would wake and look around with an expression Eva couldn't quite read. Loss, maybe. Or determination? Or both. When the ranch finally came into view, Eva pulled the wagon to a stop and just stared. The ruins looked worse. In daylight, blackened timber, collapsed walls, the shell of what had been. But the land itself remained. The well still worked. The barn had survived mostly intact, and that one tree, stubborn and defiant, still provided shade. It was enough to start with. They set up camp under the tree while Thomas rested. Over the next days and weeks, they began the slow work of rebuilding. Eva and Mira cleared debris, salvaged what they could, laid the foundation for a new house. Thomas, still weak but improving daily, directed them from a chair in the shade, his architect's eye ensuring everything was done right. It was hard work, harder than anything Eva had ever done. Her hands blistered and bled, her back ached constantly, and she fell into her bedroll each night too exhausted to dream. But there was something deeply satisfying about it too, about taking something broken and making it whole, about creating rather than destroying. Slowly the new house took shape. It was smaller than the old one, simpler but solid and strong. They built it with their own hands, every nail driven, every board placed, every shingle laid by people who'd survived hell and come out the other side. Martha visited twice, bringing news from town. Cole and 3 of his men had been hanged. The others had been sentenced to prison. The territorial governor had even sent a letter commending the townspeople for their actions against the slaver ring. Justice, such as it was, had been served. By the time autumn arrived, painting the plains in shades of gold and amber, the new house stood complete. It wasn't much to look at rough wood, simple construction, functional rather than beautiful. But it was theirs, built with their own hands on land that belonged to them, paid for in blood and loss and stubborn refusal to give up. The night they moved in, they sat around the new fireplace, their first fire in their new home, and shared a simple meal. Thomas had regained most of his strength, though he would always carry scars from that night. Eva and Mira had scars too, some visible, others buried deep. To survival, Thomas said, raising a cup of coffee and toast. To more than survival, Eva corrected. To actually living. They drank to that, and then sat in companionable silence watching the flames dance. Outside, the wind sang through the plains, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes called to each other, their voices, lonely but somehow comforting. Eva thought about the journey that had brought them here, the terror, the violence, the moments when death had seemed not just possible, but inevitable. She thought about the person she'd been in that wagon, bound and helpless, certain she was about to die. That person felt like a stranger now. "What are you thinking?" Mira asked softly. Eva considered the question. "I'm thinking that we were meant to find this place, that everything that happened, as terrible as it was, led us here, to this moment, to this life." "You believe in fate?" Thomas asked. "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe I just need to believe that all that suffering meant something, that it wasn't just random cruelty." Thomas nodded slowly. "My wife used to say that we can't control what happens to us, only how we respond to it, that our choices in the face of hardship are what define us." "She was right," Mira said. "We could have given up, could have let them break us. But we chose to fight, chose to survive, chose to build something new. And we'll keep choosing," Eva said, "every day. To be better, to do better, to create something worth protecting." The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up into the darkness. In that moment, sitting with the 2 people who'd become her family, Eva felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Peace. Not the absence of conflict. There would always be challenges, always be dangers. The frontier was harsh and unforgiving, and there were no guarantees of safety or happiness. But there was this, a roof over their heads, food in their bellies, and people who would fight for each other when it mattered most. In the Wild West, where violence was common and death was cheap, they had found something rare and precious. Not just survival, but genuine connection. Not just existence, but purpose. They had found home. As the weeks turned to months, the rhythm of ranch life settled over them like a well-worn blanket. Thomas taught them everything he knew about working the land, about reading weather patterns, about the 100 small skills that meant the difference between thriving and merely surviving. Eva discovered she had a knack for training horses. Something about her calm presence and gentle persistence worked magic with even the most skittish animals. Mira's garden flourished, providing vegetables and herbs that supplemented their diet and gave her deep satisfaction. They acquired more chickens than a cow, then eventually a small herd of cattle. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Each new addition a small victory against the harsh reality of frontier life. They had good days and bad days, easy seasons and hard ones, but they faced them all together. Sometimes late at night when the house was quiet, Eva would stand on the porch and look out at the land they'd claimed. She would think about the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, and all the blood and tears that had marked the transformation. She would think about Thomas asleep in his room, fully healed now, but still haunted by his ghosts. She would think about Mira, who'd found peace in tending her garden, nurturing life instead of taking it. And she would think about what they'd built here on this remote ridge that no map remembered. It wasn't just a ranch, wasn't just shelter and sustenance. It was proof that even in the darkest times, even when everything seemed lost, people could come together and create something beautiful from the wreckage. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors, Thomas spoke into the comfortable silence. "You know what I realized the other day?" "What's that?" Eva asked. "I'm happy. For the first time since Mary died, I'm actually happy." He looked at both of them, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You two gave me that. Gave me a reason to keep living instead of just existing." "You gave us the same thing," Mira said softly. "You saved our lives more than once." "We saved each other," Eva corrected. "That's what family does." The word hung in the air, family, not bound by blood, but by something stronger, by shared trauma and shared triumph, by the choice to stand together when it would have been easier to stand apart. "Family," Thomas repeated, testing the word. Then he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Yeah, I like that." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon and stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The plains stretched endlessly around them, vast and lonely and beautiful. It was harsh country, unforgiving country, the kind of place that broke the weak and tested the strong. But they had been tested and had not broken. They had been through fire and had emerged tempered, hardened, capable. They had survived when survival seemed impossible, had built. When building seemed futile, had found hope in a place where hope was the rarest commodity of all. In the Wild West, where life was measured in gunshots and graves, where women were property and mercy was weakness, three broken souls had found each other, had formed an unlikely family, had created something that would last. Not because it was easy, not because they were special, but because when faced with the choice between giving up and pushing forward, between dying and truly living, they had chosen the harder path. They had chosen to fight. They had chosen to survive. They had chosen each other. And in the end, that choice, that simple, stubborn, beautiful choice, had made all the difference. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. Somewhere out there, other people were fighting their own battles, facing their own demons, searching for their own meaning in the chaos. But here on this small ranch in the middle of nowhere, three people who'd been lost had found something worth holding on to. They had found home. They had found purpose. They had found the rarest miracle the West had to offer. They had found love. Not the romantic kind, though, who knew what the future might hold, but the deeper kind, the kind built on trust and sacrifice, and the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Eva looked at Thomas and Mira, at the family she'd never expected to have, and felt something warm and fierce bloom in her chest. This was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not just survival, but this moment, this peace, this belonging. Whatever tomorrow brought, drought or flood, prosperity or hardship, peace or violence, they would meet it as they'd met everything else. Together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.